Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Frankie's Open Mic. We have an artist panel today that I'm so excited to be able to be running. I'm Haleigh Overseth, one of your hosts from Frankie's Podcast Network. I'm joined by my good friend Tylee Gooderham, who's here to help me with hosting and running the panel. We've got
Hi
Siddhant
there.
Khattri back. Hello, Tylee. And Siddhant is back from Vedica Art Studios and Gallery in Mumbai, who has so graciously helped us to get this set up and bring these lovely lady artists to us. We've got Fina Ferrara, Barbara Rachko, and Susan Fraser-Hughes back again to chat with me. I'm so excited. Hello, everyone, and welcome.
Hi, Haleigh.
Hello, Haley. Yeah. Hi, Tylee.
Hi there. Such a
I
pleasure
think
to
I'm
meet you
rapping.
guys.
Same
It's like
I'm
here.
so
rhyming.
excited. It's like rhyming. I love it. Well, I'm actually really excited. I've gotten the opportunity to talk to Fina, Barbara, and Susan individually and have really great podcast conversations with you guys about your art and your style and your journeys just a little bit. And I know Tylee's been getting investigative and he's endlessly curious, just the way I am. So I'm going to actually jump over to Tylee to start with. Tylee, what's the first thing that you absolutely must know from these lovely artistic humans that we have here today?
Uh, well, so I come from an energetic background, and that's the basis of a lot of my questions mainly. But I'm gonna be all over the place. But I get really excited about what kind of triggers people to do the things that make them excited about what they're doing in the moment in the moment. So what we do is we have a tendency to gravitate those that climb the spiritual ladder have found things in our lives that excite us. And those are the paths that we follow. You have all found that quite clearly because I've been doing some investigation and you guys are all achieving really, I guess, really desirable things that whatever is exciting you as much as it is, it shows up in your work that you're delivering. So I'd like to ask each one of you at what point you found this excitement in your life that caused you to go down this path of what you're doing now. Siddhant, can we start with you because you're on the left of my list here.
There we
Yeah,
go.
I can understand, but I think that Barbara, being the senior most artist among us, it will be a good idea to start from her, and then we can
Okay,
proceed
yeah,
towards. Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
Barbara.
yeah.
So me, well, about 40, almost 40 years ago, I guess I discovered pastel and got really excited about working in soft pastel as a fine art medium. And one thing I remember at the very beginning was people didn't take pastel very seriously. They kind of it was like a secondary medium after oil paint, and people kind of just like, oh, you do like your preliminary sketches, and you'll use a little pastel, and that's it, and then you put it away, and then you make your oil painting. And
Oh,
I remember thinking, what? This is I so fell in love with pastel, and I thought it's a perfect medium. It's a perfect fine art medium. Why are people treating it like a second class um, way to make art? So that kind of got me fired up initially. As far as why I decided to kind of devote myself to pastel,
so
and
maybe,
I
can I interrupt? Can I interrupt for just a second? Because you got me really excited about something. You
sure.
you you made a conscious decision that at that time that pastel was being underrated. What was
Yeah,
it that what was it that triggered in you that caused that? Like, what was it that excited you about that?
I look. I don't know. When I started using it, the colors were incredible. I'd never seen color, you know, um, like this as vibrant. And oh, and another thing, the common uses of pastel. It means like washed out, wimpy color. And I was like, what? It's
Yeah,
so vibrant. Why?
yeah.
Why do people think pastel means pale, So that was
Yeah.
another. I was like, well, I have a mission here. I have to prove people wrong on those 2 points. Um, for starters, and then there were all other kinds of things that came up along the way. But that was like, I couldn't believe how underrated pastel was. And I guess
Okay.
I decided I was going to do something about that.
And so you did.
I love
Okay,
that. I
Ben.
think what a great motivation sometimes, right? To like prove people wrong about something. And some of the greatest things that have been done in history have been to be like, wait a minute, no, there's something else here. Let me show you something else. I love
Yeah,
that.
especially for artists, we're so contrary. We're
I,
contrarian by nature. It's like, you
by
tell me to
nature.
do something,
Yeah.
you tell me to do something, I'll do the opposite for sure.
I'm glad that that's an artist thing and I'm not the only one. So like that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. If we can, like, I'm gonna pop over then to Fina too, and if we can kind of
Yeah.
get a little background from Fina, like what was it that sparked you into the very interesting and unique performative kind of art that you
Yeah.
do?
Yes, well, I'm sorry. Well, my journey was kind of spontaneous. Like I ended up doing performance without consciously wanting to do performance. So it's just like I started, like I'm a classical dancer, so my journey as a dancer and as a, yes, my passion for movement is what got me into performance and life itself, no? So I kind of talked about it on our podcast that I had my kid when he was born, my child. It was difficult for me to keep dancing in a company, so I quit dancing, and for me it was completely over in the dance area. But then I started doing, I just couldn't stop moving. I just couldn't stop creating things. So I started creating these videos with a friend, and we ended up making an exhibition and doing a performance. And then I started doing another performance and another and another. And then I ended up performing. And after I started doing performance, I discovered performance art. So me being a dancer, I didn't know, the technical aspects about performance. So while doing performance, I started studying more about performance art, where it comes from, who are the performers, and start to get all this information and nurturing also my art.
And you
Yeah.
also choreographed. You do choreography, right? Do you
Um, no, actually, I do not choreograph. My
Oh,
performances, they are improvised.
oh, okay.
Yes, I
Okay.
use improvisation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there others included in your performances, or is it usually just one person, just you?
Yes, it's usually just me. Yes,
Yeah.
I when I started performing, I started with a friend, and then afterwards I started working on my own, and it's been like that ever since. I do collaborate with other artists, but they are usually not performers. Like I just collaborated with
Got it.
Susan and Barbara, but they have a different medium. Mhm.
Because you started off as, if I have this information correctly, you started off at age 10 as a ballet in ballet or professional ballet, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
And at some point, like you mentioned, you had a child and you couldn't continue the dancing. So a decision had to be made because you had this passion to do this performance, and you didn't know how to proceed with it, and it evolved into what you're doing now.
Yes, because as a dancer, you work in a company and you have to keep, you have to go like you're working for someone else, and
Awesome.
what I'm doing right now, I am working for myself. So
Yeah.
I have my own, I work when I have the time to work, you know. It's not
Yep.
like I have to go from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Like in a company, you have your schedule, no? So
Yeah.
that it allowed me to work on my own hours and at the same time have time to be with my child. So it worked very well for me in that sense.
So this is beautiful. Now you get to go to work. You don't have to go to work. And
Yes.
you get to do it around your free time, and the other part of your time is with your family, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's a beautiful way to live. That's what we desire to do.
That's what
Yes.
we're all trying to do. I love it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I do want to jump over to Susan and get
Yeah.
some of Susan's perspective too. So Susan, for you, like let's get a little bit of the beginnings of your art and what sparked you to jump into what you do.
Well, mine started back in art school. Like I'd always done art growing up, but I became a teacher. And then when I moved from Australia to Canada, my credentials didn't stand up. And so then I thought, okay, well, now's my opportunity to start studying art. And I went to art school and I registered for the painting, and everybody else in the class was putting paint on the canvas and I was taking paint off the canvas. And I couldn't, for the life of me, understand what my problem was. But I had a real resistance to adding things to a surface. I had to be removing things. And so I started to explore process painting. I was working with antiquing mirrors and rusting metal and finding other ways to put paint per se on a surface without me being involved. So the process actually sort of taking over. And preliminary to those, I would draw. I would do a series of charcoal drawings and then I would start to do the process paintings. And what I found was it was through the charcoal drawings that I could be my most authentic self. So that was when it was really being channeled through. Process paintings were like one step removed, but it was in the charcoal that's when the creativity could flow. So that's why I started working with the charcoal.
How did you find charcoal to be the next medium?
It just seemed I can't actually even answer that. I just I look at Barbara's work and I'm so in awe of how she works with color. But every time I try and put color on a page, it almost rejects me. It doesn't like it. So I switched to the black and white. And of course, then I just started to explore light and darkness and having to understand why I was so drawn. My MFA thesis was shadow darkness. Like started to really delve into why am I drawn to this? Why do I need to understand me? Why do I need to understand how light talks with darkness? And so it's just been a journey for about 30 years ever since.
I find that kind of fascinating when you were in art or when you were in school and everybody was putting color to the medium and you were getting kind of distracted by that and that kind of switched you into like doing something different. I kind of find that fascinating. And that's was that your turning point? Was back at school when the color was you actually wanted to remove the color?
Yeah. And then I just felt that I couldn't work with oils, I couldn't work with acrylics. And so I started making my own paint. So I was grinding up earth, I was collecting earth, I was I was baking it, I was doing all of this sort of thing, and adding, the different binders to it, the oil, just so I could find a way for paint to work with me, but not in the regular colors, but in the earth-based colors, like the natural colors. So I think it was just that natural. It was just that need to remove me from the equation and allow what's natural to sort of speak in its own terms.
I love that.
I love that too. That's very interesting. So I
Yeah.
do want to kind of If I can, just a little bit. We have a question that we've got in the comments that came up, and I want to see if I can kind of incorporate it here. Because, Susan, we did actually yesterday have a conversation a little bit about how you have explored science and trying to understand from the scientific point of view some of your experiences of light and these things that you're artistically exploring. And one of the questions we have from Omni in the comments, he's asking about, in mainstream, there's a certain kind of meaningfulness or value placed on hard sciences, right? There is a sort of credibility given to it. And creativity doesn't necessarily always get that same kind of credibility or that same kind of value necessarily when you're kind of trying to. Maybe Tyler, you can help me with a little bit what I'm trying to say here, because Omni's got its, phrased as, creativity and art is not necessarily put on the same kind of level as a hard science. So when you are each working in the things that you're doing, can you maybe talk a little bit about how you are able to sort of push past the things that maybe society might find as valuable and be able to value your creativity for what it is and for the expression it offers you without necessarily having to have that external validation from kind of the mainstream or the greater of society that might not necessarily see it that way? Siddhant, I'm going to jump in with you because I know you've got the art studio going and you've been in the kind of business world and the art world and had to kind of balance that a little bit. So maybe you can start off a little bit and then kind of direct a little bit what you've seen with these ladies and the work that they do.
You mean the question that you asked from Susan? That question you?
Yeah. That.
Well, according to me, I do not think that it is the case that creativity is not valued, because I have been in the management domain for a long period of time. And what I have learned in my experience is that all the management science part comes into the picture when there is a creation that has already happened. So it's like something that you can sort of take it as granted, but until and unless the blank canvas gets converted into an art form, the management and the science cannot get into the picture. So whatever science is exploring right now, even the innovations are basically the discoveries that have already existed in the universe, but that you are experiencing only because the creation has already happened. So according to us,
Yeah.
and based on the consciousness that we are currently living in, we think, and there is absolutely a growth in consciousness that we have experienced over the period of, like, I think, thousands of years. But the thing is that yet it is to be established that spirituality is a different form of language only of the same science. And when
Yeah.
we talk about the creation, like for example, if you establish a business, if you are founding a business, it's about creating the business first of all. So then the management dynamics comes into the picture, then the science comes into the picture, then the experiments come into the picture, hit and trial comes into the picture, and that's what science is actually.
Yeah.
But hit and
Yeah.
trial is gonna happen only when there is an existence of like the something that is already existing, according to me. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like when people used to say to me that, the lips of this woman that you are making, like I'm also an artist, so like the lips of this woman, I see this way and like I see that way, and like they are having their opinion, and in my back of the mind I used to take it as a compliment. Whatever they are saying or whatever they are suggesting, so there used to be debates based on the artwork that you make, right? So I used to think that, okay, if this paper was blank, so there could have not been any discussion regarding this. So whatever management, the number of paintings or the pricing or whatever you get into the, like you get into the streamline of scientific discoveries or the management discoveries, only happens when there is something that has already been created. But you don't see that as a management guy, like the scientific guy. You see the existence as it is, and then you start backtracking that, okay, I can do this, I can do that. But as a creator, you are offering that, like as a mother earth, you are offering nature, and based
Yeah.
on that you can sort of manipulate nature, or you can use nature, and you are thinking that you are innovating something, but it's not actually an innovation. It has already been existing in your intuition, at least. That's what my
Yeah.
understanding is. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I add to that? So I love the way you said all that, and I think to Haley's point, the question revolved around kind of left brain, right brain stuff. Your scientific versus your creative, and one of the things you said, Siddhant, was that you used to take it as a compliment when somebody would voice their opinion on your painting, your products, and
Right.
and you didn't say, I no longer take it that way, but I kind of think that what you're feeling is, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, because it's just like when somebody says something to you that you may or may not like, or that the intention of what they said to you was to maybe harm you or bring you up. Either way, you can choose to own that and then turn it into something, or you can say, well, that's just information, it doesn't matter to me, right? You can have somebody critique your work, and you can take it, oh my gosh, how dare they say these things about what I've created. It's completely wrong. Well, it's not wrong in their eyes, it's truth to them. So it doesn't matter. It's just they're voicing their thoughts. It's just the same as, like, if each of you were to create what you believe to be your greatest piece of work and put it on display, which you guys do, and somebody were to come along and say something about it that you understood to be maybe negative. But if they had said the same thing in a language you didn't understand, then you don't know how to interpret it, and it doesn't mean anything. Well, it doesn't mean anything anyway. It means that they have an opinion, which is great, because you want to elicit opinion, you want to elicit thought and excitement, or something, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I know I'm all over the place there, but
No, I love that, and actually,
No,
it's kind of
actually,
bringing me to Fina, and I'm thinking of like
yeah.
Fina's performative art that you do, and doing those kind of
yeah,
in the moment, improvisational, intuitive, body motions. But we talked a little bit about, you reading the room and reading people's reactions to things, and you actually told me the story of having someone that left a performance because of their discomfort with what you were doing. But that's it. So, Fina, I wonder, like,
that's
what you
awesome.
kind of could add to that. Yeah, given that kind of idea, and what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think the purpose of art is to like create reactions or emotions. It doesn't matter if they are good or they're bad. The simple fact that the person is feeling something, it's it's a sign that you're doing
Yeah,
the things right. So it like you said, it doesn't, if it's a negative or a positive reaction, it's still a reaction. So they are feeling something, that they are shaking inside. Something is happening to them, that is creating change inside of them. So that's your goal. You achieved your goal. So that's what I think about it.
I think so too, and I think, and I'm not from the art world, but I think by looking at each of your work, there was always one or two that really said something to me, and I hadn't quite processed entirely what it said yet. But if nothing else, like Fina just mentioned, if it just elicits some kind of emotional charge in your body, one way or another, maybe it steers you down a path that you wouldn't have otherwise gone had you not seen this.
Yes.
And I'm like, I do like that, because Barbara, now I'm thinking a little bit of your works and how, you talk about telling the story of your subject matter and sort of channeling the character, the energy of your subject matter, right? And it kind of ties in here that, you have intuitive feelings and hits and information that kind of comes to you from your, subject matter that you're painting, and then you express that. So, like your experience of that, can you talk a little bit about the flip side of that coin, not just the reactions that you get from the people who are viewing your art, but that sort of the things that come up and bubble up in you as you're going through the piece and interacting with the piece?
Yeah, when I'm working on a painting, just I mean, I think about all kinds of things. Memories from my childhood, um, uh, just all kinds of things. I'm usually listening to music when I work, and song lyrics. I start thinking about the song lyrics, and they generate other thoughts and ideas. And I and somehow I mentioned this in my podcast too. They somehow get into the work. I don't understand how that happens, but somehow they come from my brain, and they come out my hands into the piece. And it's
Nice.
it's a big mystery. But I think that's part of what artists do. We feel everything, and one way or the other, it flows into our work and makes our work that much richer. So
I
I
think.
do. Go ahead, Tylee.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Barbara, you're tuned into your higher self or your higher communications if you're open to that kind of thing, and that's when you're in that flow state. And I
yes, yeah,
like I was envisioning what you were doing as you're working and you're listening to music or you're listening to some sort of background information. My ADD brain doesn't do that. I can't do one thing and have something else going on, but
uh,
some people thrive that way. And
yes,
when you're in that state, I was visualizing as you were talking, you sitting there doing that, and then I could see this kind of connection that you have to your upper realms that feed you what excites you, and that's where
all, yeah,
everything kind of
all the
translates out.
Yeah, I spend my days thinking and looking, and reacting to whatever's on my easel in front of me. The rest of the world doesn't exist when I'm working. It's between
Yeah,
me and the piece that I'm working on, and whatever that brings up in me as I'm working. Sometimes it's just mundane things. It's technical problems that I'm trying to solve, like how am I going to render this flower so it kind of feels like a flower. So it's just a really fascinating process, and I feel like
yeah.
I use I'm sure I don't, but I feel like I use every ounce of my brain power when I'm working. And I love that. It's
Yep.
challenging. And I feel like I'm using everything I've got, when I make a painting.
And I believe that's 100% correct. Scientists say that we use a certain fraction of our brain capacity, and I feel that I know that that's not true. We're using 100% of our brain capacity. The part that we're using for the logical piece that is fastening things together and making our hands work and delivering the information through us, that's maybe the fraction, but the rest of it is communicating with everything around us and higher realms.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And this is kind of bringing me back, Susan, to
Yeah.
the Every Rose is a Story, your series that you've been working through. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday, So can you maybe talk a little bit about that here? Because we're kind of getting into that again, channeling that intuitive part of you and those parts of you that can recognize other energies and other stories from other people, and how you're assisting people in telling their stories, and these folks that you've been doing the rose imagery for that have dementia. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of, your experience of tuning into that energy to express that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it in my work, right from the beginning. So tuning into that energy, tuning into that flow, tuning into that, intuitive connection. But it's always been, for me, my way of healing me. But the Rose series is a little bit different. So this is a series, because I've had such incredible healing through my art. This is a gift for other people. This is something that I wanted to do for other people. So the Rose series was initiated by a series that I did for my mum, documenting the deterioration of a rose. And my mother has dementia, and so looking at how after 6 weeks the rose had deteriorated, yet still the central part of the rose existed. So it was like the essence of the rose still remained, even though the rest of the rose was no longer there. And I had created a series, and when I had shown them, I had some people come up to me and say, look, I've read your statement, I've seen your images, this is my story. And in that moment, I knew that I wanted to tell other people's stories associated with dementia through doing roses for them. So I have people who have had or have somebody with dementia to choose a rose that speaks to them. So I'll say to them, just take your time. When you find something that speaks to you, a rose that sort of speaks to you of that person, photograph it, photograph particularly the central part of that rose. Write something about that person for me. Tell me about, what do you want me to know? I don't want to, not about the dementia, but what do you want me to know about that person? And I'll ask them to give me a couple of photographs, and then I'll draw a rose for them. They're very large. They're about 4 foot by 4 foot. They're large scale roses. And every single rose, I've done 6 so far, every single rose has its own personality, has its own energy, its own personality. So I don't know those people, but somehow that their energy and the people who have chosen their energy, the rose, it's coming through these things and it's speaking through me into the drawing.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And I do love that. Again, I so appreciate that you're all willing to share and have these conversations from an energetic perspective, because I don't know that it's necessarily always, the part of art that people delve into. You can talk about the medium and you can talk about the physical, aspects of it or the technical aspects of it, but there's so much of yourself and of your own experience and of your own intuition that does come out in the art, right? And so and I'm going to ask Siddhant, we can start maybe with you, because you've watched Fina and Barbara and Susan in the interaction sort of realm of this, of the shows that you've done with them collaboratively and together. Is there something as an observer, as someone who is an artist and who is in the art world, is there something to the energy or the collaborative nature? Is there something that happens that kind of enhances each of the individuals by coming together in a space and showcasing these very unique and very different art techniques and these very different presentations, but in a space where they're all sort of harmonizing together?
Yeah, so in this case, I would say what happens is, like, usually artists are busy with in their art studio, and it becomes like a practice in isolation. So although art itself, the dynamics that we are in, and the nature, and it's a part of the nature. But the thing is that with that practice, the artist is totally focused on creating, and there is a realization eventually, in my understanding, and this is my personal experience as well, that it becomes like a isolated experience eventually. But what I saw was that it is an important aspect to sort of integrate the whole world together. And that's the vision of the gallery also, to like sort of dissolve all the boundaries and see that, just to make it more evident that we are all very much the same. And when you add 1 plus 1, in this case it is greater than 2, so that statistical, that error term, which is 2 plus e, I'm going in a little mathematical realm, but
Yeah.
the whole point is that this additional e, the error term, will come only when you are adding them with that plus sign. if these two one are existing in isolation, it can create an impact, but ultimately you do want to get the results from the society itself. Otherwise you can be in the mountains and sort of, renounce everything, but that complete renunciation can also not happen. So it's like, uh, it's a paradox, that it seemingly is a paradox, that if you are working in art, it's necessary to spend a lot of time in your art studio, but at the same time, if you go out, you will see that there is a lot of additional energy that you can harness when you're
Yeah.
working together, and you are syncing the whole energy. And that, like all these artists that I'm working with, I'm blessed to work with Barbara, Susan, and Fina, given that they have this willingness to connect with other people, and which is not the usual case. So not all the people are doing that. Like being an artist, many people are vying for their own benefits, and that becomes like quite transactional eventually, and they don't really get anything out of it, because they keep on evaluating, uh, that like, what am I getting out of this? So that will not lead to, if your mind is in a transactional mode always, it will not lead to that additional error term that I'm talking about, that positive energy that comes with, working together. And with, especially with Barbara, with Susan and Fina, I have seen that there's a lot of surplus energy that is already created while even in the conversation with them. So they give me ideas that maybe were already existing, or they were existing with them, but it sort of combines together that, and it there's sort of, it goes beyond the scientific explanation.
Yeah.
But I think that when we are in conversation, I feel a lot of positive energy, and that converts into more creativity, which eventually leads to themes in different shows. Like for example, the show that we are doing in Paris in the month of June, so Fina came up with the title, and it was a discussion that I was having with Fina for a long, like I think, Fina, if we, I think the whole March went in deciding the
Yes.
theme, and we were discussing, and like this conversation, what she wants and like what I want, and like what are the things that are going in the society right now, how we can integrate all of that, and connect it with unveiling show that happened in February. So it's like that conversation itself helped us to sort of, and I will give 100% credit to Fina to come up with the idea, and she mailed me, and in the morning when I woke up, I saw the email, and I was like, this is the perfect title and the theme as well. So it helped, these are the conversations I think that helps us. And not only the conversations when we are meeting together, we are working together as a team, I see there's a lot of complementary roles that we take up, and those things that we are doing in isolation becomes more like, it has an additional impact. The
Yeah.
If you see, like, if, like, let's say Barbara was working in isolation with Susan, and there was no connection with each other, so I think that won't have that kind of an impact, even in the society. So that's like, we have to give back to the society. That's my thought process. And it's like, you have to be a giver, and art itself is about giving, it's about offering. So when you are combining all the things, and I see a lot of potential in group shows. Solo show is something that we are yet to explore, but I think group shows are much more powerful than, uh, like for example, in unveiling show, Fina connected Barbara's work and Susan's work, and in such a manner, Fina said that like, she works in isolation when she's not working with a partner in a performance. But what I would say is that she was constantly talking to us before the performance and understanding our personal experiences that she eventually integrated in her performance, which was happening in unveiling show. So this is quite magical, I would say. It goes
Yeah.
beyond. Yeah.
I love everything you're saying, and the one thing that that stands out is that just this magnetism that people that have a like frequency, a like resonance, have with each other, and that's why they work together so well, and then add to each other. Because when you work so well with each other, you're on the same, frequency, the same wavelength, as it were. So you communicate openly, you become entangled, and then you're open to the ideas that the other person has, and that becomes incorporated into your manifestation, whatever you're creating. And only greatness can come from that. Greatness can't be achieved with people that are not open. If I'm on one side of the conversation and I'm just waiting for a moment to speak and not really listening to what you're saying, I'm not getting the valuable information you're giving me. You're offering up this beautiful information, not even just in words, but in your emotions, in your eyes, in your face. And I read all that, but if I'm not a vibrational match to you, then I'm not going to pick that up, and I lose out, because you've got tons of beautiful information to offer that I could have manifest into my creations. So that's why you guys work so well together, because you guys are on the same frequency-ish. You each have your own unique frequency, of course, but because you're in this beautiful range of vibration, that you do communicate and you do entangle with each other, and you are open to a back and forth transaction, like Siddhant was saying, and that becomes absolute beauty when the time comes when you're actually manifesting or creating your product. I love what you said.
Well,
I would
and what
like
I'm
to.
thinking of is,
Yeah.
I'm going to say with Fina, there's a kind of uniqueness to what you do in that you are able to expressively show the kind of energetic dance conversation that we're kind of talking about, right? Like the tuning into those frequencies and following the flow of the different frequencies that you intuitively are able to tune into. So can you maybe expand just a
Yeah.
little bit on that and kind of what you do is dance, and what you do is interpreting those kind of frequencies with your body in the moment.
Yes. Well, I would like to answer your question and also come back a little with what Siddhant said of our conversations. And I think that at least for me in my process, in my creative process, I do involve other people at least in that conversation kind of thing. I always get even sometimes with my son. I would go out with him for a walk and like come walk with me, and I want to talk to you about my next performance. I mean, I'm having this idea and I don't know how to resolve this. And he would, just in the conversation maybe say, oh, well, you could do this. And maybe it's not like I'm going to do exactly what he's saying, but that thought he gave me made me think about this other thing that I hadn't thought about. So it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about this, so maybe I can resolve it this way. So I think, like, at least for me in my creative process, it's always been important, the interaction with others. I also remember this performance I made that is called The Excruciating Seat. And I came up with that idea. I was literally sitting in an excruciating seat. It was, I was like, we were in a party, and the place where I was sitting was very uncomfortable because there were people on this side and there were people on this side, and I knew both groups, and I was like, I couldn't hear well enough what they were speaking on this side, and I couldn't hear well enough what was going on this side. So it was very uncomfortable, and I just said to a person that was next to me, like, why do I always sit in the uncomfortable place? And then he said, well, maybe because you choose it. And I was like, that is a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
And I told him, you know what? I'm going to do a performance about uncomfortable sitting. So that is how the idea came up. So in the case of La Rupture du Désir, which is this next show at Paris, yes, definitely Siddhant and we were talking about, like, I was already exploring the theme about pleasure. So we were talking about this for almost the month of March. And then during Louis' webinars, she made us do this exercise. And during the exercise, I came up with this idea, and I also told Siddhant, I just got this idea. And I talked to him about it. And he was like, okay, yes, it's a good idea, but like developing more, So it was always having this feedback. It's very important. Like for me, I do give credit to all the people that I interact with, that they it's like an energy flow that maybe at the
Yeah,
end it's your own energy that is going to create the final product, but it nurtures from the other people energy.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
That's
Um,
so what? Oh, go ahead, Tylee.
no, I was just going to say, for Susan, I've got this sort of highlighted area down here that I wanted to get to, and it doesn't really flow from what we were just talking about, but it's just in my head. You were interviewed by Lisa Garr a while back.
Yes.
It was Lisa. Yeah, Lisa Garr is interesting. She was on Gaia for a while, and I was watching her. How did that go? Can
Uh,
I?
yeah, it was good actually. It was really good. I mean, speaking of energy, she has incredible energy. So, she and her story is equally incredible. So, it was good. I mean, the conversation sort of, they were able to draw things out of me that I may not have otherwise talked about because of that pull and because of that safe place. And so, yes, it was good.
Oh,
Well, so
that's
that's
great.
kind
Yeah,
of interesting too. Like this is, I was going to go to Susan as well from Fina, just
yeah,
because I'm thinking about how you were saying yesterday that you see some of what you do as a conversation between darkness and light. And I do think that ties into like what Fina and Siddhant were talking about, the conversation that you're sort of experiencing between darkness and light as you do your work. And Barbara and I kind of had a similar kind of thing, the conversation you have with the subject matter
Right.
that you're experiencing and trying to express. So like Susan and Barbara, I kind of wanted to like shift like over to you on this sort of this energetic conversation that happens as you're going through your art pieces, that you are sort of experiencing that conversation, not between different, humans, the way that you can like bounce ideas off of each other, but now you're having a conversation with your subject matter. Now you're having a conversation with the light that you're trying to depict and express. So, like, Susan, can you start with that? And then Barbara, I do want to hear from you too on this idea of sort of having that energetic conversation happen with your art as you're working with the piece.
Well, Tyler, you were asking about the woods and the connection with the woods, and growing up in Australia, the vegetation was very different, and I love the sea, I love the water, but trees they were there, and I didn't really sort of necessarily connect with them. And then when I came to Vancouver and started walking in the woods here, there was just like an immediate connection for me. Like it just
huh.
straight to the heart. Every time I walk,
Yeah.
it's like straight to the heart. And I started to sort of explore what was that about, and it got to the point where every time I would go into the woods, I would just put out a small ask that, when I'm here, just show me what it is I need to know today. What is it that I need to.
Beautiful.
And then I would walk, and then I would come back, and I would know by the time I got to the
Yeah.
end of the walk. And sometimes it would take 5 minutes, and sometimes it would take 45 minutes, an hour, but I would know what it was. And then I'd immediately go into the studio and try and capture that connection that I could feel and translate that through my work, through the light and the darkness.
Oh, that's amazing. I just want to interrupt. Do you feel that you got your answer from the trees?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
Well, again, I'm thinking of Barbara with the subject matter that you have, some of like the dolls that you've collected and the
Right.
physical art pieces that you interact with. Could you say that it's maybe a little bit similar to what Susan's describing with the trees? What's coming up for you?
I think so. I think in a way it is. When I am attracted to the particular figures, that I decide to paint, initially I see some like personality traits in them. They all seem like such characters to me, and as I work on them, I start seeing them more as I guess as universal archetypes. And
Mm.
also, I've been rereading Joseph Campbell and his studies on comparative mythology, and that's taken my whole thought process about these figures into a new direction. Looking at what they mean in different societies, how they're used as universal depictions of uh, I don't know of like legends and stories, from various cultures, and that's given me a kind of a new direction for thought of and what I'm doing now. um, and I have a psychology background. Initially, I was, and I studied a lot of Jungian psychology, and I saw a lot of Jungian archetypes in these characters, as representations of various aspects of our psyche. So that's another aspect of what I think about when I'm making these paintings, and um, it's I don't know, it's all pretty rich, and I never really know which what's am I going to just think about the character itself? Am I going to go up into Jungian thought? Am I going to go up into mythology? But I find it a very interesting process to actually be in my studio making the pieces. And like I said, I think all day. So, and I love it.
I'm with you. Me too, Barbara. I think all
Right.
day. I can't, like, and if you're not, every waking moment you're thinking. And then even when you get into your dream space, sometimes I'm
Yeah.
having thoughts in my dream space. And then I'm like, man, is my mind just always this busy? Kind of
Right.
wild.
And then I realize I've hardly talked to anyone. I've just been thinking, and then I'll go out for lunch, and then I'll talk to somebody. It's like, oh yeah, I was so deep in my own, mind and thinking. So
Well, and that is something that I think is a little bit kind of a hallmark of a creative person to some degree as well, right? Like you
yes,
you go in and you start looking for answers as to like I'm having all of these conversations with myself, right?
right,
So you can talk about the conversations you have with people and then the conversation you have with your subject matter and with the art you're working with. And then there's those conversations that you're having internally with yourself. And so maybe a question here for each of you is how has having this creative outlet, being able to express yourself creatively when you're moving through this kind of personal internal journey, how has that helped you, or in what ways would you say that it has maybe shifted your perspectives or shifted some of the way that your internal narrative or your internal dialogue sort of continues and moves forward? Like Fina, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, yes. Well, for me, definitely every performance is like an evolutionary process, like an internal evolution in myself. So, like every performance is like taking one step upward. It might sound a little too pretentious, like towards consciousness. Like every time you're more conscious of yourself, of your thoughts, of your own internal process. I think we all, as humans, we struggle with ourselves, no?
Sure.
Maybe not everybody, but we usually tend to look forward into bettering ourselves. So through performance, that is a way. Performance gives me the place and the time to think about a specific subject that has been maybe inside of me, making me feel a bit uncomfortable, or maybe there is something inside of me that says I need to change my train of thought or my perspective about this specific subject. So working on performance in that subject gives me the time and space to like dive deep into it, and yes, like every performance, it makes me like overcome that aspect of my life. So yes.
I love
I
that.
love Yeah. And Susan, same question to you. I know we kind of had a little conversation about it yesterday, but how does the expression you're able to create through art help you on your own inner journey?
I would echo everything Fina's just said. She said it beautifully. For me, it's about removing layers. I think if I could have looked inside my head when I first began my art, it would have been quite frenetic, quite chaotic, quite confused, hurt. There was a lot going on, and with each series I do, it's like removing a layer, sort of bringing myself down to a place where it's more peaceful, where I can come from a place that's more kind and loving and peaceful. But it's been years of work, years of work.
It's a journey, right? And Barbara, you've spent quite a lot of years on the journey and following, and you did share on the podcast too that you had some very heavy and difficult life experiences that came up for you. And feel free to share if you want to again or not, but can you maybe talk a little bit about that also for yourself, the things that your art allowed you to heal within yourself as you worked through that journey of your pieces? It's also a journey of yourself.
Yes. Well, I think of each painting as a journey for me, in particular because I spend about 4 or 5 months, making a painting, and I'm usually just working on one piece, sometimes two, and I'll go back and forth. But I feel like um, it's a journey from the time when I start, when I have this big blank piece of paper in front of me on my easel, and and I often hear artists say they hate a blank canvas, and I never get, I am so excited when I see
Yeah.
a piece of empty paper in front of me. I'm like, wow, what kind of journey do I have ahead of me? I find that so fascinating and exciting and so full of possibility, that I really have no clue on what the final piece will look like. I don't know, what's going to happen in my life during that time. What will I think about? You know, um, it's just like so much exciting possibility. And yes, I do have experience, using my art to heal. Um, on the podcast, I talked about 9/11, um, having lost my husband. My husband was on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon on 9/11, and we were newly married, and he was my soulmate, and it was just a horrible, horrible experience, that a kind of unthinkable thing to happen, and it took me a really long time to get over it. And I was able to, at a certain point when I was able to get back to work again, I had I felt like it was a blessing because I could go into my studio, I could shut out the world, I could just focus on making art. Um, I didn't listen to the radio. I remember I didn't even answer the telephone in those days. I remember when, like for the first year or so, I've always woken up to a radio station, and um, I had to stop doing that because I would wake up, and I'd find I the radio station would come on, and I'd find myself sitting there counting. Okay, how many seconds will it be until someone says the words 9/11? And
Yeah.
sometimes it would be three. And I said, early on, I said, I have to, I can't do this anymore. I have to not wake up this way anymore. because it would, not a good way to start my day. But anyway, I certainly use my work to help me heal, and it helped. It helped tremendously because I could just shut everything out. That flow state was really important to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, I was really aware of it, especially at that time as I was healing. And it took years. It really took years to heal from 9/11. I'm still healing, really. But
Yeah, that doesn't seem to, that doesn't really end. There's a couple things, Barbara, that you mentioned that I find are really key, almost metaphorical. Is the blank canvas that you mentioned.
yeah,
That's the way we optionally can start every day. Every day we wake up, we can have
right,
a blank
right,
canvas of your day. And what do
yes,
you want it? Yeah, how do you want it to unfold? It could be any way you want, and ultimately is exactly how you want it to be. The
yes,
universe will get to deliver whatever it is. If you started off with a bad attitude and it's going to suck, then that's going to suck.
right.
Which the other thing that you mentioned was cutting out listening to the radio, the news. That has a huge effect on us entirely. I haven't listened to watch the news or listened to that kind of thing for years now. And
Oh,
starting
really?
off your yeah
Yeah.
yeah
Wow. Yeah, I've limited my news coverage for sure. I tend to not. I watch a little bit of TV news, and I tend to like catch up on Friday evenings with everything
mm,
that happened during the week. I'll give myself like 2 hours, listen to news, and then that's about it.
yeah
I'm
Especially,
with you.
yeah,
Like me too. I've cut that out of my experience as well and kind of shut that out. And
yeah.
I wonder, so like this is kind of an interesting perspective though. We in a kind of America and Canada, we've got a certain, I would say, or I have a sense that there's kind of a heightened level of the news and sort of information things being presented as information, things being presented as news, really being built as entertainment in the way that, I always think of like, I compare CNN to the movie Jaws. I really do. Like the atmosphere that's created, really, the
Right.
music and the soundscape and the colors that are used. It's meant to elicit a sense of urgency. It's meant to kick in your cortisol levels. It's meant to upset
yeah
you. And it is kind of an art form in its own way, in that sense. And I kind of wonder, Siddhant and Fina, Siddhant, you being in India and Fina, you being in Mexico, do you have maybe kind of a different sort of perspective given the culture that you're in and kind of, I don't want to say watching from the outside necessarily, but a perspective of people who are watching kind of that sort of experience that we might have in the American culture of news and information and that like constant bombardment of, this is the thing you need to be scared about now, right? What are some of the perspectives that you might have on that from the space of looking at it as someone who's not necessarily inundated and part of it? And in what ways are you able to maybe utilize some of those creative outlets, or would you maybe even suggest to like our culture on a broader scale of how do you find those creative ways to maybe reinterpret the noise if you can't necessarily fully shut out the noise and you can, like a lot of us have and a lot of us try to, but there is still the energy of that noise in the collective. Do you have any kind of perspectives as to how do you sort of shift that when you've removed the noise of it in the physical sense of I don't watch the news, but the energy of what the news generates in other people is something that I still have to interact with and bounce around with in our culture. So I was Fina and Siddhant, who wants to start?
Fina.
yeah
Well, at least in Mexico, the news is also very upsetting. I don't watch the news. I don't like to watch the news,
Atta
and
girl.
and I also have to interact with people that do watch the news, and they tell you, "Oh, did you see that this girl she got, raped? There's like I don't know. I just don't want to have it as." it's not that those kind of things are happening and people are dying and then they get shot, and you can revolve your day around those things, but I don't want to, and it's not just that I don't want to be aware that that is happening. It's just it's like this energy that is not good for me. I don't want
Exactly. Yes.
that kind of energy around me. So I don't know. I just also try. I usually don't look much at the news. I do look at the news every once in a while, because I don't know. And maybe we have this idea that we have to be updated. So when someone tells you something that you can answer back, or but I've also had periods of time where I like block completely, and then people tell me something about the news, and I'm like, I don't know. I just don't watch news, and that's it.
Yep.
End of
I'm there with
conversation.
you.
No, you're totally with it. And Siddhant, what about you? I mean, do you have a similar kind of experience?
So in India, there is a lot and lot of noise. If it is not news, then it is honking. So by default, you are always surrounded by noise.
Yeah.
So that's like for us, the benchmark is like maybe at 2 a.m. in the night. Sometimes we have to wake up because some celebration starts to happen at 2 a.m. in the night. So that kind of, and it's very usual here. Like there are so many festivals. There are so many people that breaking news is a norm in India. And like in India, there are so many cities that every city has some political issue happening, or elections are happening, or let's say some incidents are happening. And it's a very common thing. But in my perspective, like I started watching movies like quite late, and it never got my attention at all. Like maybe I think I started watching movies in 2002 or something, like my first movie, and that was my last movie until 2013 or something. So like it was never an attraction for me to go and sit down in front of a television, and that to not have like sort of go and search for the news, what's happening. It has never been an attraction, and obviously like it has become like a movie, most of the news channel, and you don't
Yeah.
really get anything out of it. In my view, it's like a zero sum game. You
Yes. Yes.
you start understanding something is happening, and they keep on looping. It's an infinite loop of discussions that are happening all the time, whether it is a small topic or it is a big topic or it is having a greater significance. It's only to attract viewership, and it's like like you get more engaged, and you think that there is a result that's going to happen, like one day you're going to see the result of this justice getting served. But it's not that, like, so I think I share the same view regarding the news. Sometimes I go and see if there is something significant part of the
Good.
world. So like I go and understand that what's happening, what's going on, whether it be a country specific news or like any kind of cultural news that is there. So I'll read about it, but just for the sake of like basic conceptual understanding, and then go and do my work. But it's always art that attracts me. So I don't know like if news or movies are my thing.
And I think that's one of the reasons that you guys are so elevated in the art world, and I would also say spiritually, because of what you just said. Evading things that you don't have any control over, and are manipulated by. You're not allowing that into your energy field. I see the news and media as entertainment, as Haleigh said, but also it is designed to elicit emotion. And why would they post something that is just casual coffee conversation? They won't do that because it's not going to attract the attention. But it also, I see it as a kind of a manipulative tool to steer people's thoughts in ways that aren't necessarily true. And I think stepping away from that and then focusing on the things that do excite you, the things that you guys are doing, going inside and seeing what your consciousness can deliver to you that excites you, that makes you want to do it again and again and again, and then do something with that. That's the way we raise our consciousness, and that's why our consciousness is as raised as it is. And I'll give you a small example. I do this hypnotherapy, this regression therapy, and years ago, it was that when we would put these people down into a session, they would not remember it when they came out. That was because their consciousness was much lower than it is now. Nowadays, all the clients that I have, they remember every moment of it. Typically, they'll remember it because our consciousness is so raised up in general that their frequency is higher. So they're already at the frequency that you put them into, but they're more sedated so that they can block out, the environment so that you can do the work. But I love this. This is you guys are my
It doesn't
audience.
even take an effort. It is not an effort, I think, for all of us to, like not watch news. And I think all of us are not that much into social media as well. Like it's just like
Yeah.
a necessity that you feel like to do with the social media as well.
Yeah.
According to me, it's many people are addicted to news, or maybe they are deriving their value from news because they find these topics to be the common topics to connect with other people or friends, but I think that's like a very short term.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
It is.
news
Well,
is
and
like
that's
clouds. Yeah.
it is. Well, like that's a really interesting point, though, and I would like to get all of your perspectives on, what people are looking for when they are, say doom scrolling, if you want to say that, or they're, endlessly on social media, whatever it is. There is something, I think, at the core of that they are reaching out and looking for connection. You're looking for something to resonate with. You're looking for, I know I have this internal conversation with myself that's happening. Where is there something I can ping off of that maybe validates it? Or where is there something that can bring me a new perspective that might help me in, kind of like what Fina was talking about. You're looking to better yourself. You're looking for, a sort of level up, if you will. And, to some degree, I guess I kind of wonder what would be in any of your minds, what would be the different way to approach that? What would be the different, how could we shift it so that being on social media wasn't a detrimental thing, or the news wasn't something detrimental? Like where is the connectivity? I mean, we find it ourselves individually with the art and the expressions we have, and you can collaborate in these spaces and you find it to a greater degree. What are the things or the visions that we might have or that we might create or generate of, well, what does that next evolution of human consciousness and existence look like, incorporating the technologies and the avenues we have to share things, whether it's social media or movies or the news or an art show? What's that next step? What does it look like in a world where it's not all noise that you have to shove away, but that there is an inherent connectivity that we all begin to understand and that we all can interact with in a meaningful way, not in that sort of the sort of desperation for a connection kind of way that news and social media currently seems to create. I mean, I don't necessarily know what the answers or the solutions are, but in your minds, anyone, what might that look like? What kind of a world might we be able to create? We're all creatives here, right? What kind of a world might we be able to generate or create in the spaces that we each work in naturally that might generate a new kind of a space, a new kind of a way to connect with people that doesn't have to come from fear, that doesn't have to come from the noise, as it were? Who's got a thought first? I know this.
They're creating it already.
They're thinking about it right now. Like, this is the idea think tank room. Here we are.
as someone who doesn't even use a cell phone, I've never owned a cell phone.
I
I,
love
I,
it.
Beautiful.
I think step one is put them away and, just talk. Sometimes, so I go to the gym a lot, and sometimes I get there in the morning before the gym is open, and there'll be maybe 20 people waiting outside for the door to open. So I don't have a cell phone. I'm looking around, I'm watching people, they're all on their phones.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
on their phones, scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And I think,
Sitting on the equipment that you want to use.
yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
if they would put those down and talk to each other, there's some interesting looking people among these New Yorkers, these 20 New Yorkers. And and sometimes I'll start talking, and then I know I'm interrupting them, but then at least I can get a conversation going. But I'm like, put your darn phones down, look around, and look at these people, look at, talk, just talk. So that's
Yeah.
my biggest. I don't know. I find that I notice things that people, I don't know how much of it is because I'm an artist, how much of it is because I'm not on my phone. I notice things like that other people don't notice, as I'm walking around, or just making my way through the day, looking at the sidewalk. And I saw the other day, some artists started putting in like this pink putty in every little crack in the sidewalks, and that got my curiosity up. I said, wow, that's kind of an interesting thing. Every time there was like a break in the sidewalk, a weird shaped crack, there was like pink goo in it, but anyway, I think people, put your phones away and talk and look, so
Yeah.
Have an awareness that is around you that's not necessarily coming from a middleman, a device, I
yeah.
guess, right?
Yes.
Fina,
Yes.
I think you were what I saw Fina having a thought. What do you got, Fina?
No, I don't know. I agree with Barbara. Like, but I think when pandemic started, I think it pushed us a lot into like social media, into our the only way that we had to connect with people was through internet, through social media, through these kind of Zoom talks. And
Yeah.
but pandemic is over.
What?
but
Go
but
ahead.
I think it did give us, like, it pushed us into there, so it made, maybe it created like this tendency of us to be always like connected with our phones. And definitely we need to just lay it down a bit.
I
Down
agree
there.
with all of you. I agree with that.
I was
I'm an
gonna ask.
offender of it as well.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. We all do. I mean, I run podcasts, you guys. Like, social media is a thing that I do. So, like, I'm sitting here
Yeah.
talking about that, but also this is what I do. And so, Susan, the thing that's kind of coming up for me here, though, and I kind of want to direct a little bit your way, the idea of having a conversation with people again, and connecting directly with people, and not necessarily through like the social media, the technology. I kind of want to share, like, what's coming up in my mind is the conversation we had about the photos that you were finding of your grandparents when you went back to Australia, and you were trying to find that connection to where you come from, to your family. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily have now the opportunity to physically interact with those humans, those people. They're no longer incarnated here in this 3D space, right? They've transitioned on elsewhere, and you're still looking to find that connection. You're still looking to have that conversation with them in whatever way you are able to. So maybe from that perspective, can you maybe talk a little bit about, again, that having a conversation when you don't necessarily have that human there to have that conversation and create that connection? How do you find that connection through something that is just an imagery or a representation of those people? How do you push through what would be a picture on a screen or a physical photograph in front of you to find that human essence and that energy, that signature of that person, so that you can still connect even though you don't have the physical capacity to connect.
Well, as I was saying yesterday, that I had never met my grandparents, and my parents didn't talk about them, and I had no visual imagery of them, so I didn't know. So all I had essentially were the relatives I had met when I was in England, and the little bit that I had learned from them. But just my family. I had my immediate family in Australia. My mum, my dad, my two sisters, and we were a unit, but I felt isolated. I felt disconnected, and I had this. From age 10, I knew I wouldn't be living in Australia long term. There was, even though I love Australia, somehow there was a disconnect there for me as well. So it's like I'm sort of just untethered, like not, I didn't have any anchor anywhere. So, I had my family, but I didn't feel like I could be in Australia long term. So it sort of set me on a search to try and find connections, like rooted connections. And it began with a search for place. So, I traveled quite a bit trying to find somewhere that felt like it spoke to me. And I came on this teacher exchange and came to Canada and lived in Calgary, which I love. But again, still didn't feel like that was it. And then I went to Vancouver, and as soon as I got here, it was like home for me. It just felt like I had landed home. I don't have any actual ancestral connections here, and yet for some reason it spoke to me. And then it became about, so that if this is my home and I feel like I'm home here, then how do I come home to me, and how do I begin to sort of draw in those connections with my ancestors through finding sort of that energetic connection, that understanding. So I do it in many different ways. Hopefully that answered the question.
I love how you said that. When people go and they leave their continent, their place, and they travel a great distance, and then finally recognize for whatever reason, there's a knowing that this is where I need to be. I love that, because when we find that to be the case, those people have landed in a place that they were familiar with in past lives, if you're open to that.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of time, they spent a lot of time there, and they love that place on the earth. And now you found it again, and you were energetically drawn to it for whatever reason. You said you went to Calgary, Alberta, and spent some time there, and then landed in Vancouver, and boom, here we are. This is a familiar and comfortable and home place for you. I love when people say that, because now you're in a really good place. This is where you are comfortable and where you can exercise your excitement and channel your energies and carry on with the best possible life.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I did the same thing with the house. I mean, my husband and I renovated a house in Calgary. We put, our heart and soul into this house, and I loved it, but it wasn't in the right place. And then we came and did a house here, and I never felt a connection. And so we sold that, rented for a year, and started looking. And the house that we're in now, all three of us walked in and went, this is it. This is home. So it's like finding the place and then finding the house, and then, yeah, it's a process.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, I
a
love that.
process. It's a journey. It's a journey for all of us. I
Yeah.
do love it. And y'all, I can't believe we're already almost at like an hour and a half here. I feel like we could probably be here for 3 hours. You are all so wonderful at sharing and being vulnerable and open and having these conversations, again, in different ways that might be traditional or expected in this kind of a space. And I am so grateful to all of you for being willing to join in this panel discussion and for being willing to share so openly the way that you have. So I do want to give each of you an opportunity before we go here. And Siddhant, I'm going to start with you to kind of talk about the things that you do have upcoming, that you've got some shows coming up and some other, things that you're doing around the world globally, again, with the different art that you're exhibiting. Can you talk a little bit about what you all have coming up together so that folks can get excited about the ways that you're collaborating?
Well, the Global Open Studio Day is starting off probably tentatively from 20th of April. And it will be a 30-day period where all the artists, represented artists, will have a chance to exhibit their works, and people can visit via Zoom, and they can also have a physical visit from the different art viewers and admirers. Apart from that, we have one show that is getting prepared right now in the month of May in Mumbai itself, and that's related to Fina and Barbara's work and Susan's work as well. But it will be done in tandem with the consulate of Mexico. So that's getting prepared currently, and the date will be out probably by this Monday. So we are waiting for the final confirmation from the consulate now. And then apart from that, we have like the Paris show that is coming up in the month of June, which is La Rupture de Désir. Sorry for my present pronunciation with the French, but it is it is French. So yeah, so that we have, like, the opening event is on 5th of June, where Fina will be again performing, and Barbara's work will be there, Susan's work will be there, apart from other artists that will be exhibiting. And we have like an entire portfolio of, I don't want to go beyond June to confuse people, but there are other art fairs that we are participating in that will start from September onwards. And it's in Istanbul, and like we will be in Cologne and Vienna and Mumbai again. So yeah, so that's pretty much about it.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. I love
Yeah.
it. And so Fina and Barbara and Susan, I do want to give you each an opportunity to kind of just, again, pitch to the audience whatever you might want to share further. We've got all these great upcoming shows you'll be included in, but I'll start again. We'll start with Fina. Anything else you want to share with the audience and at closing here?
Oh, well, I am currently in Tulum, in Mexico, and I'll be performing the 21st of April. And well, I'll be performing in May here in Mumbai, Vedica Art Studios, also in June in La Rupture de Désir.
Nice.
Yeah, and well, there are more shows coming up, but as Siddhant said, we'll leave it that way, and then we'll come back later on to show you the rest.
Show us the rest. And Barbara, anything else in closing you want to share?
Well, I'm really looking forward to going to Paris because, believe it or not, I've never met Siddhant in person. I've never met Fina in person. I've never met Susan in person. So I think we'll finally get to meet in Paris. So I'm really looking forward to that because we've just Zoomed, and we've never. I'm wondering how tall are they, So, because I'm pretty tall myself, but anyway,
I love it.
I'm looking forward to Paris. June 5th is our opening.
I love it. And Susan, anything else that you want to share with folks before we close out?
Just one very small addition. I'm just participating in something local here, which is an open studio sort of tour. So my studio is open for 2 days at the end of May, June. So that's it. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. I do want to direct everybody that has been watching, and thank everyone who's been in the comments and watching. Do check out the links that we have in the description here. We've got the websites for Vedica Art Studios, Gallery, and Fina and Barbara and Susan, all of their individual sites. Of course, I do have Tylee's information too if you want to connect with Tylee as well. Thank you so much, Tylee, by the way, for jumping in on this and helping me co-host. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's been real pleasure meeting you guys.
Same here.
You all have been so amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I do want to just say again, thank you so much to everyone who's already been watching on the live, and thank you to everyone who's going to watch this later. I look forward to more conversations with all of you. I do. And again, So grateful to all of you for being willing to join us and to share and to have these unique conversations, not just about art, but about the energy of us as humans and the things that art allows us to express of our humanity and share with the world and find new and better ways to connect with one another. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I really do appreciate all of you for being willing to participate like this. This has been a lot of
Absolutely.
fun.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.